Hi everyone, welcome to our very first edition of our report, January 2024, with me, Ribea, Elise. And with today's talk, we are focusing on the vow that becomes the journey of the relationship. I know that last year we concluded the year with the marriage vow season, and we are going to continue with the marriage vow season of our relationships. And this year we want to start our year with the completeness of accepting the journey relationship we find ourselves in our relationships. And because we have the requirement to accept the journey of the relationships that we find ourselves in, when it comes to our marriages, when it comes to living with your partners, when it comes to making that decision to get engaged with your partner, it becomes the acceptance that is your responsibility, that becomes that are your different seasons and requirements to respond to the journey of the relationship itself. And we are wearing today our spring season dress in our summer season, right? It's very windy today, so the wind is gonna blow because we are in the essence of our seasons with our relationships. And because we are in the essence of our seasons, we have the requirement to listen to how to respond to your relationships in the different seasons that we find our relationships in. And I know I've mentioned many times before the challenging relationships that you get. And while relationships can be somewhat challenging for the man, for the woman of our generation, and nowadays we have marriage partners that are the similar gender partner that sometimes can be a bit more challenging when a similar gender partner have to decide to separate from the relationship to go on with that is the man-woman relationship that we learned over the years. And when it becomes difficult in relationships, we have the requirement to listen to the seasons that are the relationship journey itself. We've educated in 2023 of the vineyard, the experience that you get when you enjoy a glass of wine, the experience that our life itself when you enjoy your different season of the glass of wine that you would want to have in a season. I've mentioned before that over the years my taste in wine have somewhat changed. My expectancy when I order a glass of wine is not that the normal wine taster are familiar with when they taste a glass of their favorite wines. And because I'm not your normal wine taster, and I'm not familiar with the different types of wine that there are, the types of wine that I therefore choose would normally be a lighter glass of red wine in any season. There's often times that I do not even allow myself to taste a glass of white wine, because remember, the taste in grapes for this Ribea, Elise, is the sweetness of the grapes in the season, in the expectancy that includes the complete season that I enjoy and appreciate. The grapes itself becomes that when you look at a glass of white wine, I exactly want to taste my grapes, the sweetness of that in the glass of white wine that I order. And therefore I would not often order a glass of white wine only because I am familiar with my expectancy. Only because over the years I've become familiar that I've been so used to growing up in a community where the vineyard is part of our everyday lives. The vineyard is part of our journey of life. The vineyard is part of our daily requirement to provide for the household itself. When there's times that you cannot get the job that you want, then you would go to the vineyard and you would get a daily job, and you would therefore have on a daily basis what you require in your household. So the vineyard has been part of my upbringing journey, how I grew up, where I grew up, where I spent somewhat of my years and time when I was in secondary school, and I had to have a vacation job those years. And I remember mom was working at Powell Hospital, and you grow up and you want to do your own things, and you want to financially provide for yourself, do for yourself what you're required to do. And I remember how often I had to take the opportunity to go and work at the vineyard so that I have the finances that I require sometimes. And I remember having to learn in the vineyard my response to the seasons that are presented when the grapes are in the presenting season, right? When it's completely have its complete season, and the taste of that is exactly when you take a piece of grape and you exactly know that the taste of this grape is not going to disappoint you. And sometimes when we choose our partners in relationships, it sometimes become easy when you look at someone and you get familiar with the type of people that you would want to date, and you had your experience over the years, and you exactly take the relationship partner that with all expectancy are not going to disappoint you on the journey that are a relationship itself. I know that having to learn on different websites, that when you want to date, everyone has their own expectancies, right? And because dating requires us to be open-minded to what you might be introduced to when you are introduced to a relationship partner. When we learn that the relationship partner is not now going to 100% add up to Ribea Elise's expectancy, that is now going to be the top guy that Ribea Elise now wants to date, and that Ribea Elise now wants to spend this journey that are the relationship with. We live in a time where many relationship partners goes on different dates every weekend. Where many relationship partners that goes on different dates, you know, they have that they even sleep with one another on the different dates that they go on. And because we grew up differently, because our household upbringing is differently in the oddness of this world, when you have to go on a dating site and you are now really the Ribea Elise type of person that knows that you expect someone that would want to be in the relationship with you, then you would find it odd to learn that people only sometimes want to go on what they call a date for one day. And that can sometimes makes it somewhat challenging. Because at the end of that, every one day different date that you go on, then the seasons of the relationship is going to exactly be the glass of bitter white wine that Ribea Elise are being presented when she orders a glass of white wine, and she expects the white wine to taste the way that the grapes in the white grapes taste. And if your glass of white wine on that day does not taste the way that your grapes are tasting and the way that the grapes that are used to in seasons, that when it's grape season and the seasons change, then you need to go to the store to buy your carton of grapes because you are so used to that seasonal response to your season and how you nurture yourself in appreciating the completeness of the fruits in your season. And the fruits in our season are exactly the birth womb that the woman represents. We do not, I've mentioned before in one of our discussions that we do not represent the birth womb because we have given birth to a baby. We represent the birth womb because we are the woman. And there's nothing that takes the womanness away from being the woman in the house. I know that I have had, I think the Bret Yards, an American team of, I think they are LGBT, and one of them had a baby. And while I tuned into my VOW page, and you know, America's always by a VOW page of Instagram side, and they always post stuff through there. And when I tuned in and the Bret had the baby, I remember how excited I was. Only because of the woman that how the season. I do not say that when a woman decides to be lesbian and they decide to not join, that now season because season is every part of you. I say that the rules that are in your season is the opportunity that you give yourself, that when you know that you can have children, and that you know that your womb allows you to have babies, then we get excited to learn that they have decided to make a choice to have the babies, that they, the mamas, are that becomes our generation's voice, that births and nurtures, and they've allowed themselves the completeness of that. We know that we are different women, and the requirements for us on earth are different because some of us give birth and some of us don't have children and some of us decides to not have children. And when everything amongst humanity changed and we were introduced to the LGBTQ, I don't know if you call it the LGBTQ way of life, a journey of life. When we have been introduced to the LGBTQ journey of life, and we learn that there's now going to be a woman that's now going to decide to be with a woman, and that means the seasons of the journey are going to be different. That means they are going to present to us different. That means we are going to have to learn differently from them. And it becomes challenging if you're here, Elise, that is now the 7th birth baby, and you're excited for your journey and your womb and for what it has presented over the years. And with all excitement and expectancy, you go on social media and you are introduced to the woman in this world. And then amongst all of that, a woman that decided that they have made the different relations of choice in life, and that their journeys in life takes them on a different route than what the season of woman presents and owns amongst humanity. And when a relationship takes us on different routes, for different reasons most of the times, then we learn to allow ourselves in the journey of the relationship. When your relationship gets challenging, then we learn to listen to the sound in season that are presented during the journey of your relationship. Remember, we've educated about the 4 seasons that presents its different sounds. And because the 4 seasons presents its different sound in season, winter season you recognize with listening to the rainy days. An autumn season you recognize with sometimes the wind that comes up. Sometimes the autumn season colors itself, and it presents to you the autumn leaf color that we are going to introduce just now. And when the autumn season presents a different autumn leaf color in season, and you are introduced to the different type of autumn leaves in its season, and you have the requirement to listen to the journey of that season that autumn takes with you, because every life journey are different. And because the journey of life itself is different, the relationship is the giver of life itself. The advantage to allow ourselves to birth with everything that we own that presents and represents the birth womb. Now remember the extent that women goes through if they learn that they cannot have children. And remember the amount of money women pays to say, but my requirement to present requires me to allow myself the journey at any cost that it might cost, that I might be required to pay in order for the womb to give birth, in order for the baby to be born from someone else's womb, but in order to present and to represent ourselves being women on this earth. And in the amazingness of that, we do not disregard the men of the house. We do not disregard the men that becomes the house itself. Many years ago, we learned that the men are the provider of the house. In our days, we learned that women has a requirement to be responsible in the house where we find ourselves at in marriages. We've learned that marriages can be somewhat challenging, can be somewhat difficult, and we have the requirement to be in that is the responsibility that we owe to the marriage, that we owe to our households most of the times. We know that sometimes women have found themselves being abused out of a job, and women are like the Ribea Elise that says, but my business above have the responsibility to provide for my part of the household in season. I remember how many times I've mentioned to my husband the amount of hours that I've worked at Nibblebits, the amount of hours that I've worked when I was a bartender, the amount of hours that I put in. I started at Bull and Build It, and the requirement to recruit in an instance of time, the amount of time that I was required to put in employment in Auckland, New Zealand, has me eligible and allows me to own my VOW business and to have my VOW business be funded for by the government of South Africa in communication with the government of New Zealand. And I remember how challenging it is for my husband to listen to me, that honestly most of the time tells him that my brain communication, my education journey, my requirement to educate a generation of business owners, that this is where the office world finds itself at, the journey that I have been on, my responsibility to own and to present my business to the world is exactly that becomes about business financial support amongst humanity. The vow that is now not only a commitment that some people call the vow. Remember, a commitment in an instant of a time changes into marriages that are challenging amongst humanity. The vow becomes that are the journey that you decide to take in your relationships. And with acknowledging that you vow to be on this journey that are the relationship itself, you recognize the seasons of it, you have a requirement to respond to when the relationship are fine for you and when the relationship are not fine for you. And within the 4 seasons of a winter season, that is your rainy days, that you can clearly hear the rain are falling. You can clearly see, notice the clouds up in the sky in the winter season. You can clearly feel most of the countries the coldness of the winter season. In the autumn season, you can clearly see the autumn leaves on the floor. Nowadays it is summer season and we notice the autumn leaves on the ground. In the summer season, you feel the hotness, the humidity of the summer season, the sun that brightens the day, the early morning sun that comes out. In the spring season, you recognize the blossoming colors on the different trees. And in all of those sounds, you decide that you either are on the relationship journey with a relationship partner, or that the relationship journey might somewhat be a difficult winter season. And because a difficult winter season in different countries has become storms, it has become tsunamis, it has become, the most abusive things that can happen when there's winter seasons in certain countries. Some relationships are somewhat, most of the time, clear that the relationships are abusive relationships. And that women sometimes have to be cautious of the dangers that relates to relationships. Other relationships, you have to allow yourself to listen to how do you feel, how are you being treated, how are you being nurtured in the relationship, because it becomes easy that you and the relationship partner will find yourselves together. And if the relationship can present that the relationship nurtured, that both partners were taking care of one another with kindness and respect and appreciation, then the clear sound of the relationship would be that might be abusive relationships. Because not every relationship is going to be all then we take a glass of white wine. Because the glass of white wine never promised to be the sweetest. Only because of that, we have to educate ourselves to not be difficult when we are in relationships. To not expect too much of your partner in the relationship. To not expect too much of yourself in the relationship. And when a partner clearly does not reveal any interest in you, then you know where the relationship journey are at. Then you know how to be protective with where you are at. And to know how to be responsible with what the relationship requires of you in season. And with all that is that, I'm going to say my chocolate season. Remember when I was a little girl, I used to love chocolates, right? I know my mama even went to go and work, and my mama made sure that me and my brother had the best chocolates on the Easter season. But before my mama was employed at Powell Hospital, my mama was employed where she was a cleaner. And when my mama was a cleaner at someone's house, my mama couldn't always afford to buy the chocolate that were required. And one birthday, I remember every time when I go to the store, those years we were staying in Chicago, Powell, South Africa, and those years when we had to go to the store and you had to make your choice, you would count how many cents do you have in your hand to be able to buy your choice of chocolate. And I remember I could most of the time afford to buy the chomp, because the chomp was a little tiny chocolate, and the chomp was now not according to my taste, because the chomp had a caramel in, and I was not a favorite, and I was not favoring the caramel in the chomp because I love a natural chocolate. And I remember that I was only most of the time supposed to buy the chomp, and the chomp would only last a certain time because the chomp was now just so tiny and just so little, and then the chomp would only, the flavor of the chomp would only last you a certain time. And I remember one year I was always sometimes buying a chomp, and I was sometimes buying a Tex chocolate. The Tex chocolate is what I would prefer to buy. When I really wanted to buy one, and I can't afford it, then I would buy it only to get used to the caramel taste in the chocolate itself, that I now cannot get used to in the chomp chocolate. And the times that I had to buy the Tex chocolate was not too over chocolatey for me, and it was exactly what I wanted in chocolate, and it was exactly my choice of chocolate. And I remember one year I had the opportunity, because I was introduced to a Cadbury chocolate, not a whole Cadbury, but a piece of Cadbury. And one year when I had a birthday, I remember my mama giving me either the 10 rand or giving me the Cadbury slab. And I remember when my mama gave me the money to go and buy the chocolate, or when the chocolate was brought to me, the excitement that I had, because finally I can now enjoy a whole chocolate for myself without having to have the expectancy after the chocolate is finished to have more chocolate that I sometimes cannot afford to have, because my mama sometimes couldn't afford to have more than what we had in our seasons. And because that chocolate season was so dear to me, it was so near to my Christmas celebration seasons, the excitement, the flavor that only lasts a certain time, the expectancy to be able to afford another chocolate. And that expectancy becomes the birth of the relationship itself. Your relationship giving birth in its different seasons, and that it finds itself in. And the requirement of the relationship to give birth in its seasons is the requirement that our generation has, that when we grew up, our parents who were married for many years, and even though the fathers had affairs, the mothers stayed in the houses and nurtured the family, and the fathers always had a house to be in, and the house that the fathers could name the house family. And I remember the challenge that it has for our generation to now learn that so oftentimes we have to respond to that are divorces in our relationships and marriages. There are separations in our marriages and relationships. I always say that your mama has given birth to you, so you are everything your mama. I always say that our family, the children of my mama Anna Philander, is everything our mama. There's nothing taken away from the father, but the mama that carries the baby in her womb becomes the baby that are everything their mother. Nothing taken away from the father that are the father of the baby also. Nothing taken away from our relationships in season. Because if our relationships in season does not produce the fruit that it's required to produce and present in seasons, then we have the responsibility to decide how do we nurture the current relationship further, or having to make the difficult choice that the season of the relationship has changed, and therefore it sometimes requires the relationship partners to sometimes take different journeys in their life. And for people that did not grow up with having affairs, maybe some people grew up with their parents being married for many years, it makes it challenging for our generation to decide to just divorce one another, to decide to just walk out of one another's lives about it. But because the relationships get so challenging, we sometimes have the vow that we owe to ourselves. And that means that the journey of the relationship includes the journey of life itself. And only therefore, I know me and my husband, is never difficult under discussion of divorce in our circumstances. We are never difficult when we learn that the disagreement that we have towards one another is now not a safe environment for us to be in. And most of the times we only allow ourselves to remain in the environment because of sometimes the country that we find ourselves in that requires us to be in this house one together. Sometimes because the challenge of life is maybe the financial circumstances. Sometimes the challenge that we have are maybe sometimes the responsibility of how do you feed for yourself, and all the responsibilities that comes along with the divorces that are part of relationships and of marriages. But the open-mindedness that we have becomes that births the respect and appreciation where we are at. And therefore, because we are in a generation, human beings, where we have to take responsibility of so much that are required of us in our seasons. We owe it to ourselves to birth the journey of life in everyday season that we make being human beings on this earth. We have a requirement, a responsibility to nurture, to produce fruit, to produce the greenest of seasons, no matter how challenging a season might seem in our day. Therefore, let us allow ourselves to enjoy the discussion this year that is the vow of the relationship itself. Let us allow ourselves to listen to the different seasons that produces its fruits in the relationship itself. Let us allow ourselves to know when the seasons are difficult and challenging, the readiness to respond to that you find yourself in well where you are at in your different seasons, in your different choices that you have to make. And therefore, that with all that are presented seasons, let us learn to present ourselves in every season that we experience. Let us learn to always allow ourselves to present ourselves. VOW Business couldn't have said it clearer during this year that we have a responsibility. And your responsibility is to present, to represent yourself. It is fine for someone else to have VOW Business's relationship education and to go and educate it somewhere else, and their business makes the monies, and their business have the views, and their business are being recognized, and Ribea Elise is the educator of the journey that Ribea Elise has found herself at, and that are the relationship journey education itself. And when that relationship are educated from a different environment, the response along the educations are going to be somewhat different. Therefore, I find it intriguingly interesting. Let me say that, intriguingly interesting to have to educate to our generation that a VOW Business presents itself. The amount of times that I have to echo it amongst my communications, amongst my podcasts, amongst all that I require for business owners of social media to not steal my work and want to present it through television, but to allow my education and to rather decide to support a VOW Business rather than stealing a VOW Business for someone else's education room. I know that it's difficult for business owners that owns an Instagram page, that owns YouTube, that owns Facebook, to tell themselves that they have to sit and listen to an education from a person like Ribea Elise. And they want to rather give it an education to someone that presents themselves differently on social media than Ribea Elise. For so many what reasons? Not only because of the differences in where we are at with the racism challenges that still forms part of where humanity finds themselves at in our seasons. But some social media pages you have to be harsh with, and you have to educate them from your education room that this is me, Ribea Elise, and that I take ownership of where I'm at on my social media businesses. And that no matter how different the one post might seem to the other post on my pages, that nothing takes ownership away from Ribea Elise that owns my VOW Business and my VOW Business education. Therefore, in our relationships, let us also learn and to allow ourselves to take ownership of what it is that we say, where it is that we find ourselves at, and how it is that we allow ourselves to be part of the relationship journey, and with being part of presenting in nurturing the relationships itself. That is it for our relationship talk for the very first month of January. Let us enjoy our cup of chia. It could have been chocolate here. And you can support a VOW magazine, yes. but allow yourself to listen to our podcast also and our relationship educations with the year 2024. That becomes the seasons, the vow, the relationship journey, that are the relationship itself. That is it, everyone. Let me take a let us about that. And that is it for where we are at with relationship talk for the very first part of the year. And follow all of our podcasts, our YouTube pages, our Facebook post, yes, page of VOW, and all of our pages that we are sharing our about business informations and sharing our about business journey with our audience. Have an amazing season with us.